Last summer was rough for me. I was 45, and my family farm was barely holding on. My bull was sick, and I felt the weight of my ancestors pressing down on me. I was scared. Every day was a reminder of what I was losing. I woke early each morning, trudging through the fields that weren't what they used to be. The barn creaked like it might fall down at any moment. One day at the market, I met a man in an old coat. He offered to swap his bull for mine. My bull was dying. I hesitated, but then agreed. I was desperate. The new bull arrived a few days later. It was huge, with dark fur and wild eyes. I thought maybe this was my chance to turn things around. But that night the chickens wouldn't settle down. They clucked nervously, and the cows looked uneasy in their stalls. I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was just the change. Then I heard noises coming from the barn. It was late, and my heart raced. It sounded like breathing. I crept to the barn, but when I opened the door, nothing was there. I made excuses. It was just the wind, I told myself. I wanted to believe that. But the crops started to fail, too. They wilted and turned brown when they should have been green and thriving. I could feel the townsfolk's eyes on me. They whispered when I passed by, glancing nervously at my farm. Their words were muffled, but I sensed their fear. Was it just about the bull, or was it something darker? I didn't know. One night, I found myself staring at the barn. I felt uneasy. I wanted to shake off my worries to pretend everything was fine. Then I saw the bull staring at me through the gaps in the barn door. Its gaze felt unsettling, like it was trying to tell me something. I opened the door slowly. The air was thick, and I felt a chill. Inside, the breathing was loud now. I froze. I shouldn't have come here. I turned to leave, but then I heard a voice. It was low and almost a whisper. "You shouldn't have done that." My heart hammered. I felt the panic rise in my chest. I turned around. The bull was closer, its eyes locked onto mine. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. The bull's gaze was intense, almost knowing. The air felt charged, like a storm was brewing. I stumbled back, desperate to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. I could feel something watching me, something beyond just the bull. It felt wrong. I needed to get away. I finally managed to turn and run. As I left the barn, I could hear the breathing calming down, but I couldn't shake that voice. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying the words in my head. I wished I had never traded my sick bull. I thought it would bring me good fortune. Now, all I wanted was to go back to the way things were. But I knew deep down I was already too far gone. I never saw the man in the coat again, and sometimes I wonder if he was real at all. The next morning, I woke with a sense of dread hanging over me like a thick fog. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just my mind playing tricks. I fixed my eyes on the fields, but they felt different, almost foreign. The crops were definitely worse. I had to do something. I grabbed my boots and headed outside. The chill in the air nipped at my skin. As I approached the barn, unease prickled at me again. I paused, taking a deep breath. I knew I had to check on the bull. Maybe it had settled in better after a night. I could hear a low, throaty sound coming from inside, but I couldn't tell if it was the bull or something else. I steeled my nerves and pushed the door open. The strong scent of hay mixed with something metallic hit me as I stepped inside. The bull stood at the far end of the stall, but it looked different. Its coat shimmered in an unnatural way, and its breathing sounded deeper, more resonant. "Hey there, big fella," I said, trying to sound calm. I took a tentative step forward, but then saw something on the ground. It was a clump of dirt, and next to it animal bones, small, fragile ones. My stomach twisted. I took a step back, suddenly aware of a presence in the barn that didn't belong to me or the bull. The air grew heavier, and a soft rustling echoed. I froze, turning slowly, and that's when I saw it. A figure lurking near the shadows at the back of the stall, barely illuminated by the sunlight creeping through the cracks. I squinted, my breath caught in my throat. "Who's there?" I called, my voice shaky. But no response came. Instead, the bull stepped forward almost protectively, its eyes darting toward the shadows. The hairs on my neck stood on end. "You need to show yourself," I demanded, but the figure only shifted, keeping itself hidden. I felt a surge of anger, mixed with fear. I couldn't let this continue. This was my farm. I rushed toward the shadows, but as I approached, something cold shivered through the air. I could see a glint of something metallic. Suddenly, a sharp sound pierced the stillness, a low growl followed by a whisper. "You shouldn't have done that." Every instinct told me to turn and run. My heart raced again, pounding against my ribs. I stumbled back, feeling the wall press against me as I looked for a way out. The bull snorted, an unsettling call that echoed in the quiet. Then everything went dark. The lights in the barn flickered and went out. I was left in a suffocating blackness, with only the bull's heavy breathing surrounding me. Panic set in. I had to escape. I clawed at the barn door, desperate for the safety outside, but it felt like eternity before the door creaked open. I bolted into the light, gasping for breath. I didn't look back. Something was haunting that barn, and I couldn't make sense of it. As I stood outside, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, I swore I could hear whispering, weaving through the winds. I had to know what was happening, but part of me wanted to flee. There were answers that awaited me, but they might lead to a darkness I couldn't escape. The sun was bright as I stood outside the barn, but it did little to warm the chill that gripped my body. My mind raced with thoughts of what I had just encountered. The shadow, the whisper. It lingered in the back of my mind, chilling me to the bone. I needed help. I decided to head over to my neighbor, Mr. Thompson. He had lived around here long enough to know the land, the histories, and perhaps even the dark secrets it harbored. I hurried across the dirt path, the uneven ground shifting beneath my feet like my nerves. When I reached Mr. Thompson's farmhouse, I rapped on the door with urgency. The sound echoed in the stillness, and I glanced back toward my own barn, half expecting to see that shadow slip out behind me. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing Mr. Thompson's weathered face. "Good morning, Ben," he greeted, his voice low and gravelly. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I hesitated, unsure of how to explain the fear that coiled in my chest. I found something strange in my barn. A figure. And the bull. "It's different." His brow furrowed. "Different how?" I took a breath and described the unnatural shimmer of the bull's coat and the bone fragments I'd seen. Mr. Thompson's expression shifted, darkening as I spoke. "That barn's been around for a long time," he said slowly. "Some say it's cursed. The ground beneath it hides things people don't want to remember." "Cursed? Come on, that's just folklore," I argued, although a part of me recoiled at the thought of what might have happened there. "But something is definitely wrong." He tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "I heard strange noises last night. Yelling, a growl or something unnatural. A knot formed in my stomach. You think it's connected?" Mr. Thompson nodded. "I do. If the bull's changed, then maybe something has awakened in the barn. Perhaps it's time to investigate." Before I could respond, I heard it again, the low, guttural growl, unmistakable and echoing across the field. My heart sank. What if it wasn't just the bull that had changed? "Did you hear that?" I whispered, trying to look brave in front of him. He nodded, his features tense. "Let's check it out. Together." I followed him back toward the barn, each step heavy with the weight of unsolved questions. The whispering wind felt like it was chanting my name, taunting me to turn back. But there was a gentler voice urging me onward, reminding me of my responsibility to my farm. As we approached the door, I felt Mr. Thompson's hand on my shoulder. "You're sure about this?" I took a deep breath and nodded. "We need to know the truth." He pushed the barn door open, and we were met with the same metallic scent that had overwhelmed me before. It felt like stepping into another world, one I couldn't fully comprehend. The bull stood in the shadows, still and watching us with those unsettling eyes. But something else was there too. That's when I saw it. A glint of silver, unmistakable, lying in the dirt near the bull. My pulse quickened as we moved closer. It looked like a key. A key to what, I wondered? Before I could voice my concern, I heard whispers again, soft but intense, swirling around us like a storm. The temperature dropped, and suddenly the barn felt claustrophobic, as if it wanted to close in on us. "Get back!" I shouted, but it was too late. The growl intensified, shaking the very ground beneath us. I felt the urge to flee, but I couldn't. Not now, not when I was so close to discovering what truly existed here. In the chaos of sounds and flickers of shadows, I realized I had just opened the door to something much darker than I could have imagined. As the growl reverberated through the barn, time felt suspended. I could hardly breathe. The chilling whispers wrapped around me like a wet blanket, stifling my thoughts. "Did you find anything?" Mr. Thompson's voice trembled slightly next to me. I think that's a key," I stammered, still inching closer to the metallic glint. What if it was a way to release whatever darkness was contained within these walls? My mind raced with possibilities. What if it opened a door to something far worse? "Ben!" Thompson's sharp whisper snapped me back to the present. He pointed, his hand shaking. I followed his gaze and saw the bull shifting uneasily in the shadows, its eyes flickering with an unnatural intelligence. I had never seen that look before. It wasn't the same animal that had simply grazed in my fields. It stood taller, broader, and somehow aware. "I think he's dangerous," I murmured, instinctively taking a step back. But Thompson didn't seem to hear me. He took a cautious step forward, his own fear evident beneath a veneer of bravado. "We need to find out what that key opens," he said. His words felt heavy with inevitability. Without thinking, I reached down and picked up the key. It felt cold in my hand, its weight a reminder of the fear racing through me. Where did it come from? The barn itself seemed to breathe, urging me to explore. Suddenly the whispers swelled, forming a cacophony in my ears. I covered them with my hands, desperate to block out the sound. Whispers turned to shouts, drowning out all rational thought. "Get out!" I screamed, but the words were lost in the storm of sound. Thompson met my gaze, panic filling his eyes. "We have to leave." Just then, the bull let out a low, resonant roar that punctuated the air, a sound so primal it seized my heart. I felt it resonate in my bones. It wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration. In that moment, something shifted. The barn grew darker, deeper. A figure loomed in the corner, a shadow curling, twisting, freeing itself from the walls. I thought I saw features within the haze, eyes watching, waiting. "Ben!" Thompson yelled, breaking my trance. "We need to go, now." I turned and bolted for the door, heart racing in tandem with the thudding of my feet against the wooden floor. The key slipped from my fingers and clattered to the ground, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't look back. As I crossed the threshold, I felt the darkness clawing at my heels, desperately trying to pull me back inside. A gust of cold wind pushed against me as if it wanted to shove me back into that cursed place. And then it stopped. Breathless, I stumbled onto the grass, Thompson right behind me. We both paused for a moment to catch our breath, hearts pounding from fear and adrenaline. The barn loomed behind us, silent and still. "Did you see that?" I gasped. Something was in there with us. Thompson nodded, eyes wide. "I've lived here all my life, and I've never seen anything like that bull. We need to figure out what's going on." But even as he spoke, part of me knew this was just the start. Whatever was hidden in that barn was not done with us yet. Before I could voice my concerns, the whispers returned. This time from the woods beyond the barn, dark shapes lurking at the edges of my vision. The feeling of being watched crept over me once more. "Come on." Thompson grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the house. We might not be safe yet. A chill ran down my spine, not from the cold, but from the fear that whatever we had awakened was far from finished. The next morning, the sun struggled to break through the thick layer of clouds. I could hardly shake off the feeling of dread settled in my chest. I didn't want to go back to that barn, but I knew we had to. Thompson was already waiting for me outside, a determined look on his face. "Let's take a look at that key," he said, holding it out. I gulped. As he examined it, I remembered how it had sparkled in the darkness, shimmering with an allure that had felt almost alive. "What if it opens a shed or something?" I asked, trying to ground myself. "What if it doesn't mean anything?" Thompson shrugged, worry flickering in his eyes. "Or it could be the answer to all of this. We can't leave it unturned." I sighed, knowing he was right. The barn beckoned us again, and as we walked up to it, that chill spread down my spine like 1,000 pinpricks. We stepped inside cautiously. The air was still thick, carrying the musty scent of damp wood. I scanned the interior, half expecting the bull or something worse to leap out at us. Instead, the barn was empty, its silence deafening. "Let's check the back," Thompson suggested. I followed him, stepping carefully over the scattered debris. My mind raced, the shadows seeming to move with us. As we reached the back, we found a small door, barely noticeable. It was weather-worn, almost covered by ivy. "Do you think it's locked?" I murmured. Thompson shrugged. "Only one way to find out." With a steady hand, he inserted the key into the lock. I held my breath, tension clawing at my throat. The key turned with a soft click. The sound echoed like a sinister laugh, reverberating off the walls. "Here goes nothing," he said, pushing the door slowly open. It creaked ominously, as if warning us to turn back. Inside was a dimly lit room, cluttered with old tools and remnants of machinery. But in the corner, a heavy, leather-bound book sat on a dusty table, its pages cracked and yellowed. "Look at that," Thompson said, his eyes wide with curiosity. "What do you think it is?" I stepped closer, the sense of foreboding growing. I reached out and flipped it open. The pages were filled with strange symbols and faded illustrations of animals entwined with dark figures. A knot tightened in my stomach. These weren't just drawings. They felt like warnings. "What are these?" I whispered. Thompson leaned in, studying the contents. "They look like some kind of rituals or spells. This one," he pointed, "seems to be about binding something. It looks like it was meant to control." His voice trailed off. The air changed. A heavy sensation filled the room. The whispers began again, louder this time, wrapping around us. I could feel their urgency, a palpable fear that sent shivers through my bones. "Ben, this is bad," Thompson said, his face pale. Before I could respond, the book slammed shut on its own, and the lights flickered wildly. It was as if something in the room had awakened. Then everything went dark. The whispers turned to frantic shouts, echoing in my mind. I reached for Thompson, but he had already rushed to the door. "Get out," he yelled, his voice barely audible over the chaos. We stumbled back into the barn, but it felt different. The shadows shifted, ominous tendrils reaching for us. I could see the outline of the bull standing in the doorway, its eyes glowing, watching, waiting. "We need to leave now," I shouted. And for the second time that day, I felt that grip of darkness close in on me. As we raced outside, something told me that this was just a taste of what was to come. Whatever we had unleashed wasn't done yet. The moment we burst out of the barn, the weight of the air outside felt strangely lighter, but it did little to ease the dread in my gut. I turned back to the entrance, half expecting to see something slither out, but the barn stood still, like a sentry guarding secrets better left buried. "Did you see that?" Thompson panted, glancing over his shoulder. It was like the room woke up. I nodded, still trying to process everything. The book? It felt wrong. We shouldn't have opened it. As we walked away, Thompson remained quiet, his expression troubled. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had crossed a line we couldn't uncross. There was a heaviness in my chest, as if the air itself conspired against us. "Let's head back to town," I suggested, desperate for something familiar. My heart raced with every step away from that cursed place. But Thompson stopped. "Wait," he said, eyes widening. "What if that book has more details? If there are rituals or whatever in it, we need to know. We might have stumbled into something big." I hesitated. Or we might just be digging deeper into trouble. I got a bad feeling about this. Ignoring my unease, Thompson turned back toward the barn. "Just a peek. Please, Ben. We can't walk away from this." Before I could argue, he started back toward the door. I felt my insides twist. I wanted to pull him back, to drag him away from whatever darkness loomed in there. But I didn't. I followed him, each step heavier than the last. When we reached the barn, I glanced around. The sky had darkened, clouds rolling in ominously. A storm was brewing, both overhead and in the depths of that building. In a moment of hesitation, I finally spoke up. "What if we shouldn't? What if there's something in there we can't handle?" Thompson paused. "What if this is our only chance to figure out what's going on? We have to take that risk." With a reluctant sigh, I conceded. Together we crossed the threshold once more. This time, the atmosphere felt thicker, tangible like a fog unshaken by the sun. Inside, the room remained the same, but the book was now slightly ajar, as if it had been waiting for us. Thompson rushed forward, but as he touched it, the lights flickered again. The whispers returned, stronger and more insistent, echoing around us with a kind of malevolent urgency. "Ben, it feels like it wants us to read it," he said, voice trembling. I could see figures forming in the dim light, shadows dancing in the corners. "I don't think it's a good idea." Just then the door slammed shut behind us. My heart raced. I turned and pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. Thompson backed away from the book, panic rising in his eyes. "We're trapped." The whispers grew louder, swirling around us like a storm. The air trembled, and I could feel the ground shift beneath my feet. It felt alive, angry. Suddenly, the book flew open with a force that knocked Thompson and me back. We both stared in horror as the pages turned rapidly, the symbols glowing like molten fire. "Something's coming," I shouted. Then, amid the chaos, I found myself drawn to a passage. A single phrase rang out in my mind like a siren's call. "To bind what cannot be seen." I caught my breath. That's when I saw it. A shadow scaling the walls, creeping toward us with purpose. My instincts screamed for me to run, but another part of me felt like I knew too much already. "What did we awaken?" I whispered, just as the darkness lunged. The darkness lunged, and chaos erupted. It swallowed the space like a hungry beast, a vortex of shadow that consumed the faint light of the barn. I barely had time to process my desperation before I grabbed Thompson's wrist. "Run!" I shouted, dragging him toward the far wall. But the shadows danced around us, feeding on our fear, wrapping around our ankles like creeping vines. "Ben, the door!" Thompson yelled, pointing at the place where we had entered. I turned, but it was as if the shadows had locked it tight. My heart raced, and panic clawed at my throat. The whispers intensified. They morphed into a cacophony of voices, their words indistinguishable, swirling through the air like a storm. I slammed my hands against the door, feeling its tautness, as if it were alive. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, a piercing scream cut through the noise. I flinched, and the shadows quivered. "What was that?" I asked, breathless. "Let's just go," Thompson yelled, pulling away from me. He wasn't about to let fear keep him rooted. We both pushed against the door again. The shadows writhed, tugging at our shoes, trying to draw us back into their inky depths. No! I pulled harder, and finally the door creaked open a fraction. Bright light spilled into the barn, illuminating the darkness. I could see it retreating, hissing like a wounded animal. "Come on!" I pulled Thompson through the small opening. With a heave, we dashed out, stumbling into the brightness of the late afternoon. But it wasn't over. The moment we stepped outside, I felt another presence, cold and heavy on my back. I turned, heart pounding, and saw a figure standing at the barn's entrance, tall, shrouded in a swirling mass of smoke. Its eyes glowed like embers, piercing through the fading light. "What do you want?" I yelled, my voice shaking. The figure didn't answer, but the whispers turned into raucous laughter that seemed to echo from the depths of the barn. It was like the sound of 1,000 voices, all mocking us, promising to follow. "Ben," Thompson whispered urgently, "we need to get out of here." I grabbed his arm, and without a word, we sprinted toward the tree line, the weight of the whispers pushing against us, calling our names. As we dashed through the underbrush, I glanced back. The figure stood impossibly still, but I swore I could see it shift, the shadows swirling around it like a tempest. Suddenly, we burst into the open field that separated the barn from the woods. The sight brought a moment of relief, but just as fast it was snatched away. A low rumble echoed from the barn, a warning that sent shivers down my spine. "What was that?" Thompson asked, breathing heavily. "I don't know, but it doesn't feel finished," I replied, my mind racing. I didn't understand what we had awakened, but I felt it wouldn't stop. Not until it got what it wanted. Then something caught my eye, half buried in the dirt just outside the barn, a weathered object glinting in the fading sun. I slowed, confused. "What's that?" Thompson tugged on my arm. "Forget it, let's go." But I couldn't turn away. I approached the object, heart pounding louder than the echoes in the back of my mind. It was a small, rusted key, worn but intricate, and it felt significant. "That's when I realized," I said, lifting it from the ground. "It might be our only chance to stop this." But the moment I held it, an icy wind swept through the field, chilling me to the bone. The laughter returned, louder now, as a shadow broke free from the barn, creeping toward us. And I understood we were far from safe. I tightened my grip around the key, feeling its cold metal bite into my palm. The shadow lunged forward, stretching like the gnarled hand of a living nightmare. I could hardly breathe, terror wrapping around my throat as I stepped back, dragging Thompson with me. "Ben, we have to get away!" he shouted, but I couldn't tear my eyes from the figure. The glow of its eyes pulsed, drawing in the fading light as if feeding on it. I felt small, like a fly trapped in a spider's web, knowing it wouldn't let me go. Then a thought flashed through my mind. "Thompson, maybe the key can unlock something." His face twisted in confusion. "Unlock what?" "I don't know, but we need to find out." I hesitated, heart pounding, but I couldn't shake the idea that this key held answers. Was it a way to confront this darkness, or to escape it? The laughter grew louder, and the shadow surged forward with terrifying speed. It reached for us. "Run!" I yelled, but I felt anchored in place, my feet stuck in the muck of fear. Thompson pulled me away from the looming hand, and we sprinted towards the edge of the field, the key clutched tightly in my fist. The laughter echoed harshly, merging with our ragged breaths as we ran for the trees. As we broke into the copse, I could see shadows flickering behind us, darting among the trees. "Where do we go?" Thompson gasped. "Let's find somewhere to hide," I yelled, scanning our surroundings. Ahead was a clearing, and beyond that I spotted the outline of an old shed half hidden among the undergrowth. It looked dilapidated, but it could give us a moment to regroup. We dashed into the shed, door creaking eerily as we pushed it open. Inside, a thick layer of dust hung in the air, and the scent of mildew clung to the shadows. We caught our breath, leaning against the wall. "What's the plan?" Thompson asked, wide-eyed and anxious. I held the key out, examining it under the dim light. "We figure this out. There has to be something. Some door or lock that it opens." I rummaged through the scattered debris in the shed, moving rusted tools aside and peering into dark corners. There must be something here. Then, just as I was about to despair, I noticed a small chest tucked behind an old barrel. My heart raced. It felt like fate. I approached it slowly, feeling the weight of both the key and looming shadows bearing down on us. "What if it's empty?" Thompson asked, worry etched on his face. "Then at least we tried." I knelt beside the chest, brushing off layers of grime. "Here goes nothing." I inserted the key into the lock, praying it would fit. It slid in smoothly as though waiting for me. With a deep breath I turned it, feeling a jolt of energy surge through me. But just as I began to lift the lid, a gust of wind howled through the shed, sending the door slamming shut. My heart raced again, but this time it was different. The whispers returned, not as laughter but as faint cries, pleading. "What did we just open?" Thompson whispered, his face pale. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to find out. And just then, I heard something inside the chest begin to stir. My pulse quickened, dread pooling in my stomach. "Ben?" Thompson pressed, eyes wide. "What's happening?" I didn't know. But whatever lay within that chest seemed ready to burst forth, and all I could think was that we needed answers, before it was too late. The lid of the chest creaked as if warning us. I took a step back, adrenaline surging through my veins. "Thompson, we need to get ready," I said, but my voice had more panic than bravado. Suddenly the chest popped open and a thick mist billowed out, wrapping around us like cold fingers. It swirled chaotically before pulling back, revealing a glimmering object at its center. I squinted, trying to make it out through the haze. "What is that?" Thompson asked, taking a cautious step closer. "It looks like a mirror," I realized, staring at the bright surface reflecting odd patterns, almost alive. The mist danced around it, and I felt a pull, as if the mirror was calling to me. "Maybe it can show us something," Thompson said, hopeful but still terrified. "Or maybe it's dangerous," I warned. The laughter from moments ago echoed faintly in my ears, unrelenting. My instincts screamed at me to be careful. The air in the shed felt heavy with expectation. "Come on," Thompson urged, reaching out toward the mirror. I grabbed his arm and pulled him back. "Wait. We need to think this through. What if we look inside and see something we don't want to?" "But what if it shows us a way to escape?" he countered, his determination flickering like a candle in a storm. I could see how much he wanted answers, just as I did. Tension stretched between us as we hovered over the mirror, caught between fear and curiosity. I took a deep breath, my fingers itching to tap the surface. That's when I noticed something else, faint shapes forming in the mist, like faces twisting silently in anguish. "Thompson, look," I pointed. "Do you see that?" He leaned in closer. "It looks like people. Are they trapped in there?" My throat tightened as I realized the implication. They might have been trapped because of the very key I held. What if the shadows are their doing? What if that thing, I gestured toward the mirror, is connected to whatever we just unleashed? Thompson's eyes widened with realization and fear. "Then we need to close it. Now." As we backed away, the mist began to swirl again, angry and chaotic. It clawed at the air, filling the shed with a frosty chill that sent shivers down my spine. The laughter grew louder, now tinged with frustration and fury. Before we could react, a gust of wind roared through the shed, throwing debris into the air. The shadows outside surged toward us, merging with the mist. My heart pounded hard against my ribs. "We have to figure out how to close it," I shouted. "The key, maybe it will work again." Thompson grabbed my arm frantically. "But what do we lock? The chest or the mirror?" "I don't know." Panic threatened to overtake me as I looked around, searching for a solution. Just then I spotted an inscription on the mirror's frame, faint but visible. "Look, those words might mean something." I bent closer, trying to decipher them as the mist thickened, swirling violently around us. But chaos erupted as the laughter intensified, echoing like a storm. Thompson grabbed the key from my hand, determination in his eyes. "I'll try the mirror. Just keep that thing away from us." Before I could protest, he dashed toward the mirror. "Wait, Thompson!" I screamed, but the wind howled louder, drowning my voice. As he reached out to touch the surface of the mirror, everything went dark. The laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by a deafening silence. And then I saw it. A shadow creeping towards him from beyond the chest, darker and larger than the one we fled from. My stomach dropped as I rushed forward, my plan to save him forming in frantic urgency. "Thompson, no!" I shouted, but it was already too late. I lunged towards Thompson, desperation surging through my veins. The moment I reached for him, the shadow coiled, snaking around his limbs with a cold touch that sapped him of warmth and strength. He let out a muffled cry, eyes widening in horror. "Ben! Help me!" he gasped, the words barely escaping his lips as the dark form consumed him. I fought against the overwhelming dread that clawed at my soul. "Stay still!" I shouted, trying to reach for his hand. But the darkness enveloped him, pulling him into the void behind the mirror. I felt my heart crash at the edge of despair. I could see it now. The shadow began to morph into something else, twisting and reshaping, claiming its prize. It felt as if time itself fractured, echoing the agony of countless souls trapped within. "No!" The word exploded from my throat with a feral cry. A surge of rage abandoned my fear as I swung the key toward the mirror, feeling its cold metal burn in my palm. "Let him go!" The dark energy hissed as I thrust the key forward. I aimed for the mirror's surface, determined to unlock whatever binding force kept the darkness free. Maybe it was tied to the key. Maybe it could reverse the curse. With one desperate thrust, the key made contact. The mirror pulsed, rippling under the force, and the shadow flinched as though it had been struck. Thompson's terrified gaze met mine for a fleeting moment, and I felt the world pivot on that brief connection, an anchor against the chaos. "Ben, do it!" he shouted, his voice charging through the swirling mist, giving me a flicker of resolve. I twisted the key once more and felt the tension in the air thicken. The whispers surged, rising, swirling into a storm of furious sound. "Say the words!" the whispers demanded, beckoning me to look deeper into the abyss. "Bind what cannot be seen," I yelled, voice rising above the fury. "I command you to relent." The mist recoiled, dark fingers unfurling, but the laughter escalated, morphing into cries of despair that echoed around us. In that moment, the contents of the chest began to swirl together, the mirror shimmering with ghastly intensity. The shadows fought against my words, but I could see Thompson was also fighting, straining against the darkness that consumed him. "Keep going, Ben," he urged, his face flickering between fear and determination. I didn't know how long I could hold on, but I pushed every ounce of desperation I had into that command. "I bind you. By the key and by the light I command you." As I uttered the last word, a blinding pulse erupted from the mirror. It engulfed the barn as the light collided with the darkness. The balance shifted violently, shadows screeching as they peeled away, retreating into the depths of the barn. Thompson broke free from the dark grasp, just as the light surged, illuminating everything. The shadow twisted, shrieked, and then silence. The spectral form dissolved into nothingness, leaving a cold chill and a faint aftertaste of defeat hanging in the air. I felt Thompson's weight slump against me as he stumbled into the clearing of light. "I thought we were done for," he whispered out of breath. He looked over to the now still mirror, which glimmered with a dull sheen, as if it had hollowed out. Relief washed over me, but it felt tethered to uncertainty. "Did we stop it?" I stammered, heart racing as shadows receded. "It feels quiet," Thompson replied, glancing at the barn's entrance where shadows still lingered at the periphery, slinking back into the dark places. "But I can't shake the feeling it might not be over." I nodded, eyes straying to the barn. The key slipped from my fingers, falling into the dirt with a dull thud. Maybe it's just hiding, waiting for another chance. We stood in shared silence. The weight of unspoken words loomed thick as I thought of what we had witnessed, of faces, of what might still remain beyond those walls. The whispers faded, but the air crackled with remnants of our encounter with something ancient, something waiting for awakening. "I have to go home," I finally said, my voice steady but laced with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Shadows still crept along the edges of my vision, a reminder of the darkness that almost consumed us. "Me too," Thompson murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "But this will follow us, won't it?" Perhaps it would. The mystery was far from resolved. As we walked away from the barn, the clouds began to lift, letting light in for the first time that day. Sometimes I still think about that barn, the key, the whispered voices, and whether we truly stopped what resided within. I guess some things are just meant to linger, like shadows caught at the corners of your memory, waiting patiently for the next darkness to consume.